Hey, how are we doing today?
Good. You?
I'm doing awesome. My name is Jason, and
My
this
name is
is
Craig.
and now this is a little podcast we like to call the Bunny Rabbit's Hole. And if you got to hear our first episode, then you would have heard me screw that up. And now this is a podcast, but we just like to explore a topic, and then we talk about that for a little bit, and we just let it take us off on rants and tangents, and then we'll come back to that one when we hit the end of the hole.
Right. Yep. Hence
So what are
the
we
bunny
talking about
rabbit.
today, Craig?
Today we're going to talk about pop culture, or as you and I called it when we were kids, cool shit.
Cool shit.
Because that's what it was to us.
Exactly. Pop culture. All right. I like it. I like it. So we might as well get this out of the way. We're both 40 plus. So when we refer to pop culture in our childhoods, it's the late 70s, early 80s, up into the 90s when we finally hit adulthood.
Right.
Well, when legally we became adults, we never really grew up. So
right. We could drink in the 90s.
Yes.
Of course, we drank in the 80s. We just had to be careful about it.
And we snuck some in the 70s, but we won't go to there because our parents would get in trouble.
Right. All right. Well, I mean, I guess when you think of 80s pop culture, what's the first thing that pops in your head?
To me, I always think of when I start with pop culture. I remember TBS was a huge like superstation. They were like they're still out there. TBS, they're big for basketball and stuff like that. But they used to have this show on Friday and Saturday nights called Night Tracks. It was nothing but music videos, and that was before MTV hit our area.
Right.
And it didn't start till like 11 o'clock at night. I mean, it went to like 4 in the morning, but we'd stay up until 4 in the morning, Friday and Saturday nights, watching this. So, you got to watch all these different music videos, which,
right,
if that music came out now, it'd be bullshit.
Right.
But,
well, I mean, for me, I didn't have TBS because I was out in the country. We had 3 channels, but it was on Channel 5. It was Friday Night Videos. And that's what they called it. It's a thing. But, yeah, so, and that was the same thing. It was on that late at night. And usually, TV would cut out back then at, midnight or 1 o'clock?
Yeah, you get the Star Spangled Banner, and then it would shut down, and then you just looked at, like, the poltergeist screen.
Yeah. Go into the light, Carolyn. Go into the light.
Fuck you, bitch. You go in the light.
Right. Just get me the fuck out of here. But, yeah, for me, the first thing that pops into my head when I think of pop culture from the late 70s, 80s, Star Wars.
Oh.
I mean, Star Wars is, arguably the largest thing that came out of that time period. Yeah. And still carries on today in a different version of it.
Just think of the thousands of dollars that we blew up in our sandbox.
Oh, yeah.
Fuck you, Boba Fett. Boom.
With the firecrackers, the M80s, and the BB guns.
No, the BB guns.
That was a lot of fun.
The little one-pump Daisy BB guns were the best because they always stung so long.
Yep. Yeah, I got one right in the forehead too. That was not fun.
But no,
with
Star Wars shaped how a lot of us viewed how movies were done, B, how we thought about characters on screen. Even though when you think about it, the story isn't original. I mean, it's been redone so many times. Orphan boy learns from an old man that he's got mystical powers, leaves his family. They ended up, I guess, dying. In his case, they did.
Then gets a little more.
Yeah, but I mean, we've seen that story so many times. I mean, Lucas has come out and said that he's actually stolen it from like the Seven Samurai series and the spaghetti westerns. But
I mean, you look at the big movies from the 80s. You have Star Wars, The Karate Kid, same premise,
right?
Or from no father figure goes sees Mr. Miyagi, has to catch flies with chopsticks.
And that same story evolved. I mean, it didn't really evolve. It just grew into bigger franchises. I mean, Harry Potter is the same fucking story. I mean, and a creepy old man, in this case, Dumbledore, comes and tells him that you're a wizard, Harry. And then now he gets to hang out with other kids in another mystical land. And then his aunt and uncle, did they die? I don't know.
I don't. You know what? I got through a few of the movies, but then just completely lost interest.
Hmm.
My wife says they didn't die.
I'll be that dick.
They just didn't like Harry.
Better.
I've never read the books either. But I mean, but if you look back at it, though, not only did Star Wars, do that story, but they also launched what was known as the trilogy. They were the first set of movies to really have that 3-part series, and from there you got Indiana Jones, you've got Back to the Future. All these went on and on and on for sequels.
Yeah.
So the sequel became a big thing.
You couldn't have a second one.
Right.
You had to have a third to finish the story.
And then some, like Police Academy, you get up to like 6 of them.
Yeah. And then there's like, Police Academy 14, Police Academy meets Jason.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's another thing you
might as well meet Bobcat Goldthwait, right?
Right. I mean, you think of pop culture 80s, you automatically go to those horror movies too. Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Hellraiser.
Especially in our childhood, because we watched every single one of those. I Spit on Your Grave, which to this day, I still shouldn't even watch that movie, but I watched. I mean, it's like a rape snuff film. There's no reason I should have watched that at like 11 years old.
No. And when you were watching some chick bite off some guy's dick in self-defense at 12 years old, it's pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
And today, it's still fucked up.
But the horror genre, I think, is when you really get into the 80s, that's that really it really solidified pop culture at that time, because you had movies like Nightmare on Elm Street, which actually translated over into having these soundtracks with bands like Dokken doing, some really weird Dreamwires track for, in reference to Freddy Krueger. But it kind of blended all of these things, and then that came back into these grandiose videos that they used to make with the horror theme involved. I mean, some of these videos that they used to make, like Jonathan Landis directing Thriller for Michael Jackson, was huge.
Right.
He just got done doing American Werewolf in London, and it's like, yeah, why not? I'll do a 15-minute Michael Jackson video. Right.
Well, I mean, you look at it too. I mean, not only did all of a sudden we had these bad guys, but we had bad guys with personality. I mean, before that, we had Dracula, we had the Wolfman and stuff like that, but there's no real personality. Now all of a sudden you got Freddy Krueger, who's cracking jokes while he's slicing you up. So now we developed this character that they never really bothered with before that. But they want you to be enthralled with the character, but still root against it.
Exactly. And if Freddy Krueger would have been done back in like the 50s, he would have been Knife Hand Man.
Right.
Because everything was man. I never understood that. Same with superheroes. It's like everybody says something man. If you just kind of look at it and you're uninitiated, you'd think that all these are a bunch of Jewish superheroes. You got Spider, Aquaman.
I think of the 80s. That's another thing, that pops up is comic books. Because comic books in the 80s, I mean, I look at things like comic books as soap operas for teenage boys in the 80s.
Yeah.
Because of the storylines and everything.
Because the internet wasn't around yet, and it was almost like porn that you could get because of the way that these women were dressed, and the disproportionate size of breasts to muscle size that they had was fun.
Yeah, when realistically, if they were that muscular, they would have virtually no breasts.
Yes, and they would freeze to death.
Right. But I mean, no, go ahead.
Oh, but going back to the comic thing, it's funny because we read a lot of comics back then, but then I took like a 15-year hiatus where I didn't read. Like I stopped at about the time that I graduated high school, and then a few years before before Iron Man came out and they started the whole MCU movies, I started catching up. I'm like, oh, if they're going to create this whole thing and eventually lead up to Avengers, I kind of want to know some of the stories, and then they're bringing out characters that I thought were secondary that are now going to be, major players like Black Panther. I wanted to start to get to know, so I started reading a bunch of graphic novels and started catching up really quick. But then I started realizing, like, they did a massive reboot at one point in time because Nick Fury used to be a white guy that chewed on a cigar like Howard the Duck.
Right.
So when did I don't remember. It's cool, but Samuel L. Jackson was a perfect Nick Fury, but I missed that memo. And then there was a few other things like Johnny Storm is no longer Sue Storm's brother or something.
Yeah, that one lost me too. I got lost because, like you, I mean, I went past high school. I went to probably like my mid-20s and then stopped. But back then it was still all the same. And none of that stuff had changed. But again, they had that reboot and they changed all the characters. And I mean, and that's just it. They're constantly rebooting now. And that's why, comic books are kind of disappearing. I mean, between, digital comics and manga, it's kind of killing off the comic book scene for Marvel and DC, because they're so focused on movies now that their comics have to be related to the movies, because otherwise all the internet nerds get pissed off and, are spamming them and blasting them, and, because they can't just separate, okay, this is just a movie.
Yeah. And, like characters like Quicksilver, I'm still confused on him because in the Avengers movie, he's Scarlet Witch's twin brother. Mm-hmm. And in the X-Men movie, he lives alone, but he's still Magneto's son. But they were Magneto's son and daughter back then, and so there's a lot of storylines that are just I didn't read the whole time, so I don't know.
Right. Well,
and I watch a lot of these. I've been watching a lot of these comic book YouTube videos and stuff like that. Like some of these guys really know their story, and they can really relay the stories that are in these things very well. It's like I don't even have to read it anymore. I can just watch this guy explain the whole thing to me. But then when I get done, I'm like, I'm glad I just watched 45 minutes of this guy explaining this whole story, because I don't have the time to read that much, and I don't want to invest that kind of money into buying them all, because going back in the day why I really got out of it was all the alternate covers. Like I don't care about the covers. Oh well, they're gonna be worth something someday. Not if they made 30 million of them.
And they're still not worth anything 20 years later.
Exactly. Exactly. Like baseball cards.
Yeah. Well, and, that's where Marvel started going downhill, and that's where they started losing so much business, because of all these alternate covers and all this stuff like this. And that's why they started rebooting everything, because, they pissed off their fans. Because why do I have to go out and, buy all these different copies of the same freaking comic book? I was talking to my wife the other day. I said, you know what I'd really love to do? I'd like to win the lottery. I'd like to go out and buy Superman #1, the mint condition, in that pristine, plastic thing with it graded and everything. I'd like to go to a comic book convention, sit down, cut that fucker open, and sit there and read it in front of all those geeks. I'm like, how many people would be pissed off? And she's like, well, what's that cost? I'm like, let's just say it costs $2 million. And I said, after I'm done reading it, it'll be worth $1 million, but it'll be funny.
You probably could have got it from Nick Cage at a discount before his tax sale.
Right. But I mean, they've done so much to it, and they've changed the storyline so much. I can't keep up with it. I tried to get into them recently, and it's just like I don't know where the fuck they are. I'm like, now we have. Thor's old girlfriend Jane Foster's Wolverine's daughter becomes a female Wolverine. He's got a son that we never knew anything about, and it's just all this stuff. And they're going, where? I was reading all this shit when these guys would have been. What the fuck happened? And then my son, he starts telling about it. He's like, oh, well, they're from dimension such and such, and these are from dimension such and such. I'm like, oh, fuck me. Right. I'll just watch the damn movies.
If you're going to get into interdimensional and multi-dimensional characters like that, I just want to stick with Rick and Morty, okay?
Yep.
That's, there's infinite Ricks, there's infinite Mortys, and they all, Rick's a dick in every dimension. That works for me.
Except for the one dimension where he became Morty's father's friend.
Right, yeah.
Or whatever he was.
the slow Rick.
Slow Rick, that's it. But, something else that the 80s movies did, and it started before the 80s, but, I mean, they really caught on the 80s, was those cult classic movies, like the Toxic Avenger.
Oh, yeah, like the trauma films.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They created that cult like what was that other one on River's Edge with like River Phoenix?
That was a great movie with yeah, there was a lot of great people in that, like Daniel Roebuck and
was it Keanu Reeves in that too?
Yeah, and was it Crispin Glover?
Yeah,
was in that.
But I mean, it launched those cult classics and stuff like that, and I mean, it obviously, I mean, also from the 80s, you get movies that now even the people as kids are like, I love that movie, like the Goonies,
Mm-hmm.
The Goonies, that show will just, it'll outlive us.
Oh yeah.
I mean, and it's not really the greatest show. It's a good show. It's a good feel good show, but people dig it, and people are always going to dig it.
Yeah.
But I mean, the movies from the 80s. I mean, you look back, you're thinking like, when you think of movies from the 80s, the ones that pop out are like Star Wars, Back to the Future, Indiana Jones, Jaws, and all the other Jaws movies. Yeah.
Not the third one. That 3D shit.
Yeah, I never got into that. But then you go into then you also have the counterculture to like Star Wars being Star Trek. I mean, because the Trekkies, if you talk about Star Wars to the Trekkies, they're liable to gotcha. They're gonna just disembowel you on the spot.
It's funny. I have a friend whose wife is a Star Trek fan, and he's a Star Wars fan, and they're about to have a kid. They're going down all these different names. I'm like, well, wait a minute, because one's a Trekkie, one's into Star Wars. How about Han, Luke, Picard? No.
But I mean, yeah. Also, for us, I mean, think of all the catchphrases from the 80s, right off the top of your head. I mean, one of the number one ones that pops in your mind is, "Where's the beef?"
Where's the beef?
Yep,
that was huge.
Little old lady in the Wendy's commercials.
Pac-Man fever.
Yep. And I mean, sit on a potsy.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
But they all had these catchphrases, and they just don't have those as much anymore.
And when they do, they're most of the catchphrases from today are like viral videos on YouTube. They're actually done like that one lady that say, "I ain't got time for that." Everybody was saying that forever, and nobody even knows who the hell this woman is.
Or that really stupid 13-year-old with "Cash Me Outside" crap.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck does that even mean? Never mind, I don't want to know. But I mean, you look back.
There's that one that I find myself saying all the time. Get off my lawn.
Yeah. I mean, you look back though, and we had shows like Alice. What's the catchphrase from Alice?
Kiss my grits.
Yep. You got Cheers. I mean, we're not necessarily a catchphrase, but every time Norm walked into the bar, what happened? Yep. I mean, we had these like iconic TV shows. I mean, that's when we all first met Michael J. Fox. Was in Family Ties.
Family Ties.
He was playing that little Republican, Alex P. Keaton.
Yes.
That was actually one of the first sitcoms that tackled drugs. Do you remember that episode?
Oh yeah, when he was taking the diet pills because he wanted to stay up and study.
Yep.
But do you remember when Tom Hanks, they also tackled alcoholism when Tom Hanks played their uncle?
Oh, I don't remember that one.
he was on there, and Michael J. Fox's character come down and saw him going through the fridge, and he started drinking maraschino cherry juice because it said alcohol in the ingredient.
But look, we also had like Moonlighting when Bruce Willis was actually funny.
And he had hair.
Yeah, before he went on his action spree.
But they actually were one of the first ones to do. I mean, I'm sure other shows had done it first, but they were the first ones I remember to do like a throwaway episode, because they did the Taming of the Shrew. They did all Shakespearean, and they were dressed up, and they did like a whole episode based around that play. And like, this has no meaning on the rest of the series. And it didn't, send the story, but it was entertaining in the fact that it was different. And a lot of other shows have done it since then. Like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia has done couple throwaway episodes like this.
Yeah,
but it was groundbreaking.
Right. And you think of, and I'm going to go on the catchphrases one because I'm just looking at my notes here, and I'll say the catchphrase, you tell me the movie. Right turn, Clyde.
Oh my God. You got me on that one. Fuck, right out the gate.
Clint Eastwood.
Oh yeah, Every Which Way But Loose.
Yep, or Any Which Way You Can, which was the sequel.
I forgot about that monkey. Actually, it was an orangutan. Was that what it was?
I can't. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, we had.
But we then had there was that really shitty Tony Danza Going Ape one. That was.
Oh, yeah.
That was really bad. So not everything from this time period that we're talking about was good. There was a lot of shit.
Right. Oh yeah, there definitely was. I mean, we had the original Roseanne, which celebrated white trash.
Yeah. And
I didn't like it then. I didn't like the reboot because I didn't even watch it.
I saw like part of an episode when it was on, when the people in my family were watching it, but I didn't give a shit. So
no, it just
seemed loud. So.
It was loud, obnoxious, and irritating. That's all I got from it, and it was just like, because my ex-wife would watch it. I'm like, why are you watching this crap? I mean, it's just. I mean, you look at today and people are going, oh, you're just getting participation trophies. That's pretty much that entire show. Roseanne wants a participation trophy.
But she actually taught the world a lesson on that show. Or actually, it was not on that show, but about that show, was the reason that near the end that she just didn't give a shit, she just mailed it in, was if you don't have your name on the pilot episode as creator of the show, you don't get creative rights for the show.
Oh.
And they did a rewrite of the episode, and she didn't get creative rights on that because somebody else changed the pilot episode that she had written, and they got creative rights on the show. She did not.
Oh.
So near the end, she didn't give a shit. That's why they ended up winning the lottery, and they killed Dan, and that
right.
They just didn't care anymore.
Right.
It's kind of like George Romero not getting any credit for Return of the Living or Nightmare or Night of the Living Dead, because that wasn't the name of the movie on the script. That was the name of the movie when it came out. So it wasn't his film. Even though he shot it, he wrote it, he directed it, he produced it, it wasn't his film because they changed it at the 11th hour.
Yeah, you gotta love loopholes. Well, that kind of brings me up to something modern that I want to touch on. Tim Allen, Last Man Standing. Everybody's up in arms because this show got canceled, and they think it got canceled because of his conservative views. But in reality, it got canceled because he owned the rights to it, and they just couldn't afford to keep paying him. And that kind of touches on that whole Roseanne thing with not being, labeled the creator. But it would cost them too much to keep producing these because they had to pay him so much for the episodes. And if you're not going to get the return out of it, why would you bring the show back?
Right. Well, it was like everybody was up in arms when all the cast members from Friends signed a pact agreement that they'd all be paid $1 million per episode. It's like, oh my word, that's $6 million per episode. Well, a few years later, they're paying Ray Romano $5 million an episode just for him.
Right. Well, and I think if I want to circle back here real quick. Talk about you talked about the Nick Fury color change. Basically, that's the easiest way to put it.
Yeah.
Marvel and Hollywood have been nailed hard. You remember when they redid that, where they made that movie, Avatar: The Last Airbender?
Yeah.
And they had the white kid playing him, and that's when they got really nailed for whitewashing everything they did. They did the same. Comic books, everybody's white, all the main heroes are white, and blah blah blah. They're doing that, so I'm okay with it. Especially Samuel Jackson's fucking great.
Oh, yeah.
He cracks me up, and he does a great job as it. I think there needs to be more diversity and stuff like that.
I don't know. I was thinking about this a while ago. Who else would I'd rather played Nick Fury?
Well, not David Hasselhoff like he did back in the 80s.
Exactly. So definitely Samuel L. Jackson.
So we've touched on movies, we've touched on comic books, we've touched on TV. I still got a lot of notes on all those, but I mean, let's think back about there's the cartoons that we watched. I mean, back then, every Saturday morning from like 8 a.m. until noon, just blocks of cartoons on every channel.
And if you were lucky, a monster movie afterwards.
Right. Or if not, like after school. Like there was always the after school movie shows. One week was Elvis, one week was, monsters, one week was Godzilla,
Right.
But I mean, we also had, we didn't have all these things that keep us locked in the house, so we had to go outside a lot.
Right. Well, and like you said, the only time we really got to see cartoons was for like a couple-hour block after school, before dinner, and then Saturday mornings.
Right.
And, so you really got to appreciate the cartoons that were on because that was it.
Right.
Even if they were bullshit, that was it. We watched it like the Smurfs because it was the only fucking thing on.
Right. And remember how excited we got when they created the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon?
Oh, hell yeah. I bought that, my brother bought that for my son for Christmas a few years back, and we watched the first 3 seasons.
Yeah, my brother bought it too. And, because, that's another thing, that has stood the test of time. Dungeons and Dragons, and when we played it, we played the basic version, and then we switched to the advanced version.
Right.
Now they're on the 5th edition, but it died out for a bit, but then it's made a huge comeback. So that's something that we can talk about from the 80s pop culture, but also in today's pop culture.
Oh yeah, role playing is still huge. There's still conventions on, even though back when we first started playing games like Dungeons and Dragons, they were owned by TSR, and Gary Gygax was still a big player in the whole thing, but then it was bought up by this company, like I think it was bought up by Steve Jackson's Games, and then it was bought up by Wizards of the Coast, and
still own them.
It's grown to the point where Vin Diesel wrote the forward to the 30th anniversary edition of the Dungeon Master's Guide. So it's secretly been in the underlying pop culture all along, but when nerds became cool, not like Revenge of the Nerds, that big old fiasco, rapist and sexual assault, and
but more like
I'll go into that part of pop culture in a second. But when nerds started becoming popular, it almost became cooler, to be a bookworm, stay in my basement, role play. All those things started coming to the forefront of society, that role playing kind of actually lost its stigma.
Right.
And then there, with the advent of because of that, you started getting shows like Big Bang Theory, where nerds coming out of the woodwork. There was always a popular nerd character in all the little kids shows, and so it was an interesting little tidbit flipping on society that the nerds rose to power without having to do any hijinks.
Turning point that made Dungeons and Dragons when we were kids in the 80s?
You repeat that.
Do you remember the big scandal that made Dungeons and Dragons the devil's game back in the 80s?
Oh, you mean like was it Mazes and Monsters?
Yeah.
That movie where Tom
Hanks.
Yeah, like Tom Hanks freaked out.
Yep, and thought it was all reality.
Yeah.
I mean, it was based off a true story. No matter what you do, you're going to have one person that goes off the rails with it.
You have that in anything, though. You have people like that go too far playing fantasy football.
Right.
That loses their wife and their kids because the dipshit won't stay off his phone trying to select his team for the following week.
Right. Well, and a lot of that comes down to, and I think I summed it up really good in that conversation I had the other day, is all these people are going, oh, Dungeons and Dragons, that's what's wrong with my kids, or heavy metal music, that's what's wrong with my kids today, or violent video games. What it really comes down to is the parents not wanting to parent and using all the shit as babysitters for the kids.
Right.
And not taking responsibility for how their kids are acting.
How about you get
because, right. I mean, sit down with them, have a conversation, play a game with them. Do what they're interested in, what you're interested in.
If you hate those video games so much, I bet you if you sat down and started playing it, you might actually enjoy it.
Probably. I've tried. I'm not into it. I'll let him play them. I'll sit there and have a conversation with him. I play D&D with my kid.
Nice.
But it's fun.
My son and I listen to that devil music together.
Mm-hmm.
We go to a lot of them devil music concerts together.
Yeah. Yeah, my oldest and I went to a couple. But here's another catchphrase one. What you talking about, Willis?
Man, I really miss Different Strokes.
Yeah.
I would have loved for them to all not die or just and to see like a 30th anniversary.
Yeah.
Just to see how they're all doing. But It's weird to think that Dixie Carter, the stepmom later in the thing, ended up living longer than two of the cast members.
Yeah, two of the younger cast members.
Yeah. I mean, Todd Bridges is still up and kicking.
Yeah, he's the only one though, isn't he? Didn't Gary Coleman pass away too?
Yep, he passed away a few years ago. Dana
Plato.
Plato. Yeah, she passed away after history of drugs. That's
the other thing the 80s is famous for is destroying child actors.
Yes.
Because, if you're a kid actor in the 80s, by the 90s, you had either OD'd or you were so whacked out that you didn't even know your name.
Yes. Or you're so whacked out because you're hiding horrors that you had to live through to become a child actor, i.e. Corey and Corey.
Yeah, Corey Feldman, because Corey Haim's dead now.
Yes.
But I mean, if you look back to the 80s, though, I mean, a lot of stuff that we watched was no big deal to us because it just seemed normal. But if you look back at it now, you're like, what in the hell? I mean, look at like the Jeffersons or All in the Family. Those two shows are just completely based off racism.
It's funny because the Jeffersons came from All in the Family because they had the Archie Bunker character who was just a bigot.
Right.
He hated everybody. But then they brought in George Jefferson, who was the black version of Archie Bunker. And then they're like, what? That show's doing okay with a white guy. Let's bring this black guy. Let's throw him up in a high rise in Chicago and call it good.
Right. But
that show was groundbreaking too, though, because that was one of the first shows that had an interracial couple.
Yes. Which I thought was great. My parents didn't care for it, but I thought it was great. But I mean, you look back at that, and some of these things that we watched, like I was saying, it didn't seem like a big deal to us. But now that I don't know if it's because we're more educated, we're more aware of our surroundings. But we look back at that and go, how the fuck did they get away with doing that?
Well, like I'd mentioned the movie Revenge of the Nerds, and
Yeah.
that whole movie is based on everything the nerds did. They should have been arrested for. They put
Mm-hmm.
video cameras throughout the sorority house, and especially in the bathroom, and they sat
Yeah.
around and videotaped them. Then
Yeah.
they took screenshots of the video and sold a naked picture of another girl. Then he rapes her because she thought she was about to have sex with her boyfriend.
Right.
Oh, surprise! It's me under the Vader mask.
Right. After we've had sex.
Yes. So back then, it's like, ha ha ha, that's funny. Today, no,
No.
that's
And
appalling.
looking back on it, I'm like going, okay, yeah, it's not that funny to me now either.
Yeah, that line, that's my pie. That's like, no, that's it, it was funny back then, but
Right.
and
Now
that's,
you
I mean, there's so many other references like that. I'm picking on that, but there was like Porky's where the guy sticks his dick through the hole into the shower, the women's shower.
yeah.
You know, seemed funny back then, but then again, I was like 13 when I first
Yeah.
seen.
Yeah.
Well, something I don't remember.
Well, and also, not really to justify it, but our brains hadn't fully developed by then either. We still had adolescent, prepubescent humor.
Right, we
Where
were just happy to see
dick jokes
boobs.
is funny. Granted, dick jokes can still be funny, but
Very true.
but you remember they also had, and I'm going to segue here a little bit, TV shows that would bring all these famous actors together, and there was like two that stand out to me. It was The Love Boat and Fantasy Island.
The plane, tattoo.
And they would always bring on these, actors at the time, and put them in these roles, and it was like a who's who of who's popular at the time.
Right. It was almost like it was almost like a game show where these like the 64 or the $65,000 pyramid or whatever the hell it was called.
Yeah, or Hollywood Squares.
Yeah, with the Hollywood Squares, or they bring these people on, but then they would bring these people on and they would get their groove on a boat.
Yep. Well, they actually had to act in these shows too, though.
Right. Unless you're Paul Lynde, which he just walked around and was himself.
Right.
Asshole. But he was on like several episodes.
Right. Well, and you look back at these shows, and these shows really, like, especially when you get to the mid or later 80s, it started promoting music too. I mean, look at the one that sticks out the most to me is Miami Vice, and was it Jan Hammer? That do.
Tons of Glenn Frey songs throughout that, and then Glenn Frey actually is a guest starred in an episode. Yep.
But I mean, it just, and I think that was also kind of made cop shows cool.
Yeah. Well, everybody thought they all, it's like, I'm going to go down to Miami. I'm going to live on a sailboat, and I'm going to have an pet alligator and drive a Lamborghini.
Right.
Or a Ferrari Spider, whichever I feel, or we go early seasons, we'll go the Ferrari Spider, we'll go later the Lambo.
Yeah, and everybody's got the sweet outfits.
Or was it it was a Ferrari Testarossa, that's what he had.
I was never a car guy, so
I was like a high-end 80s car guy, so that was part of my pop culture back then. It's like I was never obsessed. I just hung out with enough people that really enjoyed cars, so I kind of absorbed it.
Well, though cars were a part of pop culture back then, which they're not necessarily now.
No, not really. There's no staying power of a Toyota Tercel. I
mean, if you look back at the 80s, the big car that sets out with like your people in middle America is the Trans Am.
Yeah, Smokey and the Bandit.
Yep, Smokey and the Bandit, or I mean, even a little bit more current movies, more 90s, but like Billy Madison, he drove the Trans Am to high school because that's what was cool when he was our age. He was a kid.
Exactly.
He had the
Speedwagon shirt.
Yep. But it also back then, I mean, let's segue into music, and you had everything was like pop and top 40, and if like you want to listen to heavier rock, it was all underground. I mean, Metallica was all underground. They didn't hit the radio until their album Injustice for All.
Yeah.
And that was their fourth album. But they had a huge following.
There was tons of times that we would go to record shops. Yes, record shops. And we'd flip through all the vinyl, and then we would honestly have to judge an album by its cover.
Yeah.
We took a chance because maybe somebody had read about it in a metal magazine, because that was really how you got most of the information back then.
Right.
We'd start flipping through, and it's like, ooh, Destruction. I'll try it.
Right.
Or if it was a cassette tape or something like that. But then, with cassette tapes, it was always, if you got one that was cool, then you could high-speed dub it and give it to your friends.
Right. Well, I mean, like, back then we had Columbia House Records, and we could order, you get one cassette for $1 and then, 30 cents for the rest of them or something like that. And I mean, I remember going through and picking them out and going,
taping the penny to the thing and the postcard and mailing it back.
And I mean, I remember I picked out, I'd never heard of them at the time, but it was Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. And so I get the tape in the mail. I'm listening to it. I listen to it. I'm really digging it. And then like a month later, it starts hitting the radio. But it has already been big in LA because we're like, 6 months behind LA up here at that time.
Radio waves travel slow.
Yep.
But it was fun, but that was it was fun because there was no instant gratification. It's like you saw what your buddy had bought at the record store. You know what you bought. If yours sucked, you're like, well, maybe his wasn't so bad, so I can actually,
right.
I'll at least get to listen to that one eventually.
See, I was lucky because my mom had all these records, and she had good records. It was Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, Rolling Stones, The Who. She had Tommy, and that's what I listened to growing up, where all my friends, like our cousins, had to listen to country growing up. Because
I was like Tommy James and the Shondells, Herman's Hermits, Dave Clark 5. Those are the type of things that my parents listened to. But my mom liked bands like Heart and the Eagles, but a lot of that stuff was more, we listened to that on the radio, and she had all this other stuff
right
on albums.
Yeah, my mom was really into what was happening now. But my mom was the youngest out of that whole group too.
Yeah.
But
there was some other crossovers that happened in music back in that day. You had a artist like Cyndi Lauper who brought in pro wrestling.
Yeah.
And so she had people like Captain Lou Albano and Hulk Hogan and Junkyard Dog and Andre the Giant all in her videos.
Yep.
For a little bit. So that kind of brought all that around. And then that, WWF, as it was called back then, was,
right.
That was a whole pop culture subject on its own.
Yeah.
That grew. I was never really a huge wrestling fan, but I respected what they created out of the art that they did, because
right.
I mean, I actually ate Mr. T's cereal because he was on WrestleMania and he fought the Junkyard Dog, and it's like, that's pretty damn cool. I want some T's too.
Yep. Well,
I pity the fool don't eat my cereal.
Cyndi Lauper was also on WrestleMania.
Yeah.
And that was a great crossover that helped promote both brands. Because I'm going to admit, one of my little guilty secrets is I like wrestling. Oh. I still watch, but the history of it, the WW, it's now the WWE, but back then it was the WWF. And it was at that time that Vince McMahon Sr. owned the company, and he created the WWF. And because back then there's all these different wrestling promotions, and they all had their own territory. Terry the King Lawler was like in the Mid-Atlantic territory, like the Mississippi area and stuff like that. Right. Whereas Vince McMahon Sr. owned the New York area. And It was Andre the Giant that launched all that, because they would bring Andre the Giant to all the different people's promotions. They would just, he would be a surprise guest because they had this stuff built around him where he never lost, so they couldn't keep him in one foundation for too long, because then it would just get stale.
Because there was nobody to wrestle him.
Yeah, nobody can beat him. So, then they start bringing in this crossovers like, Cyndi Lauper, Mr. T. I mean, Mr. T actually boxed Roddy Piper in a wrestling match. But I mean, but see it from there to what it evolved to now. You had the WCW come on to Ted Turner, who wanted to compete with Vince McMahon, so he created the WCW, stole a lot of the WWF's people, and that could be an entire show on its own if we wanted to get into it. All right, I'm a little bit of a wrestling geek.
No, that's fine. But that was something that was cool back then, because not only was it wrestling ingrained into our popular music at the time, but it was also into our cartoons, because there was the whole Hulk Hogan cartoon with, they had all the wrestling buddies there. It was into like all of our product promotions. It was in all of our commercials. They had their own breakfast cereals. It was in everything. It was almost as, but to go back to the very beginning of this episode, when you were starting to talk about what Star Wars meant to popular culture, what Lucas did with Star Wars is he laid the foundation on how you market an empire.
Right.
Everybody else followed suit, and I think the next biggest evolution of that was wrestling in the 80s, because it was in our movies like Rocky. Hulk Hogan was in Rocky 3, I think it was. There was like a promotional bout that they did in that, and then it was in our breakfast cereals, our toys, our shoes. It was everything.
Yep.
Even those that hated wrestling couldn't get away from it.
Right. Well, that's just it. Back in the 80s, if something was remotely popular, it blew up into something huge. I mean, you look at, the most popular video game from the 80s, Pac-Man. Yeah. Pac-Man, again, got its own cereal, its own cartoon, plush toys. Yeah.
Pac-Man Fever was it reached. I don't know if it reached number 1 of the billboards, but it was definitely high.
Yeah, but I mean, and that's just it. In the 80s, if something got just remotely popular, they would just blow it up. But again, we didn't have the instant gratification nation idea back then. That developed probably the early to mid 90s.
Nor did we have the amount of channels either, so we couldn't get away from it if we wanted to. It was on, Pac-Man and My Little Pony commercials were on all the way through our G.I. Joe cartoons. We couldn't get away from it. We couldn't switch and watch a different cartoon because there wasn't any.
Right. And one thing that always stand the test of time too is the toys. I mean, you go back, the toys we played with, G.I. Joe action figures, He-Man action figures, wrestling action figures. Those things are still, being used today.
Stretch Armstrong.
Not necessarily. Yep. I mean, He-Man figures probably aren't, but I mean, like the G.I. Joes, they continue.
There's actually a huge contingent out there of people that collect He-Man figures.
Yeah, but they don't play with them; they collect them.
They collect them.
I don't really care too much about the collectors. I mean, I get it, I understand it, but if I'm going to buy something, I want to either read it or play with it.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of it to me. I mean, back then, it wasn't Xbox or PSP or PlayStation. It was, you had Atari, you had Nintendo, or you had a Sega. First, it was just Atari or Intel.
And television, or they had the short-lived ColecoVision too, which was really shitty.
And then expanded on into Nintendo. Nintendo was probably mid to late 80s, and Sega come out in the 90s, I think.
Yeah.
But, in Atari, it was like you had Donkey Kong, you got Pac-Man, you got Defenders, and you got the one where you shoot the asteroids. I mean, those were the big ones. And then, so that was the other thing. If a movie was good, they tried to create a video game out of it, and then they failed completely with E.T.
Oh, that game. I remember my one of my best friends growing up. His mom bought him the ET game because that was, I mean, ET was everything. I mean, we ate Reese's Pieces by the ton. We
Yep.
just loved ET, right? So he got the video game. It's like, oh man, I know your family's gonna hang out and play it, but can I at least come over and watch? You know, that was still a thing. It's like, yeah, I may not get my turn, but I just want to see it played. I want to check it out, you
Right.
know, tell my friends that I'd seen it, you know. So I go over to Richie's house and his brother puts it in and then he starts walking around. He's like, I don't know what to do. And they like hits this dark green spot and all of a sudden he falls into a hole. Like, that's stupid. So he starts figuring out his head lifts and all of a sudden he starts floating and he fell in the hole again. And it was like 15 minutes of this trying to get out of the hole, and then the timer finally ran out. And then his brother Jamie just gets pissed, throws the controller down. His mom yells at him. He takes off. So then Richie picks up the thing. Same fucking thing. Timer ran out. Like, wow. I don't really want to go home right now because it's kind of rude to say, yeah, I just came over to see the game, not you guys. But
Right.
That game was terrible.
I was lucky enough to avoid it.
And
Never had
Jones game for the Atari was ridiculous too because I never even knew it. I didn't know what a tsetse fly was, but all of a sudden it's like the biggest villain of like video game history because you can't destroy it. It doesn't go away, and it just sits there, hovers around you, and kills your life.
Right.
And so you go to back then you had to go to the library. You had to look up in an encyclopedia to find out what the damn tsetse fly was, and really it's a vicious fruit fly, and that's the big enemy.
Right. Well, I mean, when you think of movies from the 80s, though, you mean you had, I mean, every I'm going to say every decade, so like the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, had their big stars. And for us in the 80s, it was Eddie Murphy because he was still funny.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we had Eddie Murphy. We had
Harrison Ford.
Harrison Ford. We had Mel Gibson before he went crazy.
Yes.
You know, and I mean, weird thing is Tom Cruise, and now Tom Cruise again, you know.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Top Gun, one of the huge films.
I'm going to admit this to the world right now. I have never seen Top Gun.
You're lucky. A lot of people from my generation loved it.
My brother stopped me one time. He's like, how did that even work? He's like, how did that work? How did you not accidentally seen it or anything like that? It's just, whenever it was on, I changed the channel. I don't know. And I don't even see my feelings of Tom Cruise aside. I think he's fucking weird. And I'm not a big fan of Scientology or what they stand for, what they do to people. That's a whole other episode we'll do later down the line. I like his movies. He's been in a lot of movies that I've liked. You know, a lot of those movies are guilty pleasures of mine. Like I'm glad there's another Mission Impossible movie coming out because for some reason I think him and Simon Pegg work great together.
They do, don't they?
But I've enjoyed his movies over the years, you know, but
I even liked his Mummy remake.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, real life, he's fucking loco. I mean, but you think about the other. I'm bouncing around
he
here.
ruined Katie Holmes for me. That shouldn't have happened.
Right. Yeah, I mean, because back in the 80s, I mean, he had some, like Cocktail, I liked that. I did like that movie. And Risky Business.
Yeah, both great movies.
And I loved them in The Outsiders, too.
Oh, yeah. Outsiders, that's a fantastic movie.
Yeah. But I wasn't a big fan of Top Gun.
And then I never saw Top Car or Days of Thunder.
Right. I haven't either. But, you know, I'm going to say my all-time favorite movie from the 80s is The Dead Poets Society.
Really?
Yep. It was the very one. I was going to say it's one of the first or second movies where Robin Williams plays a straight guy. Mm-hmm. You know, not like gay straight. I'm talking about like funny, not funny, more drama. He played a serious character, and that movie touched me on a level that no other movies ever touched me. I mean, back growing up, at the time it came out, I was like 16, and we just moved into town, and like, 2 blocks away from me was this theater called the Broadway Theater. And at that time, when movies would come out of the regular movie theater, they'd go there and you could watch them for $1.50. Every day that week that Dead Poets Society was in there, I went in there and watched it.
That's awesome. I did the same thing with the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
But I mean, that to me, that was the standout movie. And there's another movie, I'm pretty sure you and your brother watched it with me and my brother, but it's like, for me and my brother, it's one of the, it's our cult classic from the 80s. That was Time Bandits.
Oh, yeah. Love that movie.
Because, well, I don't know what we're supposed to call them, but I'm calling them what we call them then, midgets. You had midgets, you were gold.
Okay. All right. I have a theory about the little people.
Okay.
Whenever you see one randomly, you're going to have a good day.
I remember that.
But there's a couple caveats to it. One is you do not befriend the little person, midget or whatever. You do not befriend them because then it backfires. And two,
right.
You never make eye contact if it's a female because you get punched in the face. Not by the female little person, but by somebody else randomly later in the night.
Right.
Those are 2 caveats to the whole thing. But otherwise, if you see one, you can have a good day.
You remember when we lived in Pittsburgh?
Yes.
Every day driving to school, unless we were late, we always saw that, okay, I'll go little person in the 3-piece suit.
Yes.
Remember that?
Yes.
And when we saw him, we were having a great day.
Yeah.
But those times, those days.
If we were running late, then no, it didn't work.
He was my hero.
Our schedule, what really happened.
Yep. But yeah, I mean, but we think back to the toys of the 80s, and these toys, that's when they built toys tough. I mean, you remember the Tonka trucks?
Oh, hell yeah.
These things are solid metal. You could kill somebody with one.
We tried.
Yeah. We tried blowing them up. You can't blow them up. They were indestructible.
Okay. This is the difference between toys built today and toys built back when we were kids. We used to shut the lights off in the basement of your mom's house.
Yep.
And it was my brother and his brother and Craig's brother on opposite sides of the whole basement. And we'd build like forts and all the windows were blacked out. So when you turn the lights off, it was completely dark. But then it became dodgeball in the dark with these toys. And you didn't always know what was coming at you.
No.
Until it hit the paneling on the wall behind you.
Yep. Well,
I don't remember if it. I'm pretty sure it was your brother that threw it, but I got hit square in the face with a boxing glove that was just hurled as hard as he could throw it. Hits me square in the face, and all of a sudden, I got like night vision. I could see the whole room. I'm like seeing stars, but it lit up the whole room. I could tell. I felt like I was fucking Daredevil for a minute because I could tell where both of them were. I think I'm bleeding, but I can see the room for a split second.
Well, and it would never fail. My brother would always get hit in the nuts.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a bad memory to have of my childhood of your brother's groin getting attacked, but
and he'd always get so angry about it. That was just crazy. But I mean, I look back on the 80s as with a lot of fond memories. I mean, like the toys they had were so iconic too. I remember you had the Cabbage Patch Kids, you had Hot Wheels, you had the Big Wheel, you had the action figures, the Teddy Ruxpin Slinkies, and all these toys, you could beat the shit out of them, and they still continue to work.
You could not hurt a Teddy Ruxpin. Because we had a friend who used to kick his sister's Teddy Ruxpin down the stairs all the time, and that damn thing would still play music. They never put anything other than like music cassette tapes in it.
Right.
And Teddy couldn't keep up.
Right.
But that's a funny story in itself. But that thing was built like a tank.
Right. Well, and another thing about the 80s that I really miss, and I wish our kids had more of it today, arcades.
Yeah.
We kind of have something here where I live. It's a place called Game Go Computers where you can go in and spend like think it's like $5 an hour and play video games like on the Xbox, on the PlayStation, or something like that. And
Yeah,
it's
we have
cool.
a few of those out here like that.
But or even like computer
Gamer.
games. But I mean, we used to have tons and tons of arcades growing up, and then we would spend so much time there and so many quarters there.
This is going to say a lot about me as a person and my feelings towards camping. But some of my best memories of camping as a child was the arcade game or the little arcade shed that they had next to the general store in our campground.
Yep.
That was more fun than the actual camping.
Right. Because no matter what we did, we would piss our parents off. So it was easier just to be away from them.
Right.
But I mean,
our tent's leaking. Shut up.
Suck it up.
Go to sleep. But I'm in 2 inches of water in here.
Right. And I mean, the weird thing too is like for one, I don't care anymore because I'm bald. But like the hairstyles from the 80s.
Oh man. Stair steps, rat tails, mullets.
The flock of seagulls.
Oh yeah.
But you know what? I mean, for me, I didn't necessarily have a mullet. I just had really long hair that was all the same length, and it was like halfway down my back. And then I lost all my hair. But I don't even know what the popular hairstyles are anymore. I couldn't even tell you. I'm noticing different colors, and I think that's kind of cool. But we started that in the 80s.
Yeah, different colors it's mainstream. Like there in the school that I work at, there's tons of teachers that have purple, pink. One lady's got a blue mohawk. But it's acceptable, and and that when I was a kid,
right.
There's no way my teacher was going to have a mohawk.
Right. I mean, being in high school with hair that long, I was always looked down on, and it was assumed that I was on drugs and stupid because my hair was so long.
I had the whole Steven Seagal thing going, where I was back in a ponytail. I looked like an Italian hitman, but a full hitman.
I looked more like I'm gonna go with more like somebody from Metallica or something like that, with the hair all straight and all long. Actually, more like Alice Cooper, probably.
Oh. But I didn't have I didn't have the mobster that clothing style. Right. That wasn't me. But it was weird because when I was like in 8th grade, I definitely had a mullet, but I didn't have a permed mullet like most of my friends did.
I did. That was before it all went. I grew it all out because I no sooner got home from having that mullet. They say, don't wash your hair or wash it out, or the perm. I hopped in the shower as soon as I got home. Wash that shit out because I'm looking at it going, what the fuck did I just do?
There was so many people I went to school with that had that. I'm like, so the point of growing your hair out is to grow it out.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we going to make it curl and shrink up? So it's like this matted rat's nest on the back of your head. And
I did it to make
nice and tight, and then we're just going to have cotton balls.
Right. See, I did it to make my mom happy because I didn't want my hair cut, and she's like, well, let's try this. I'm like, all right. But, man, once I saw it, I was like, fuck this. Then I went, wash it out, then grew it all out, and it got really long. I had longer hair than most of the girls in my school. Mm-hmm. And back then, girls had long hair.
There was no way I had taller hair than any of the girls in my school, though.
No, I couldn't do that.
Because there was the monster. My sister had the monster, and
you remember the wave?
Sorts of shit, yeah.
A lot of people had the
sacrifice cans of Aquanet to this thing, and everything else too. She put mayonnaise and beer and all this other shit in her hair. It's supposed to make her get volume. We're spending more on groceries for her hair than we are for us to eat with here. Come on, let's figure that shit out.
I think I remember which sister that was too.
Oh yeah.
Oh, but if you go back, and this is what I find that pisses me off today, is what they call the music today. It's hair rock. Remember what we called it?
Bitch rock.
Well,
Or
no,
glam
it was
rock.
glam rock or poser rock.
Yeah.
Your bands like Poison and all that. It was
Warrant
just,
and
I mean,
Jackal and
right. I mean, you look at like bands like Def Leppard became that, but what you go back to their roots, the way they started, they were great when they started.
oh yeah, their
And then
first couple albums are really good. High and Dry is a great album.
yeah, then you go into like Pour Some Sugar on Me and all that crap. I'm like,
And
oh
then
man.
okay, so I bought their album Hysteria the day it came out. And I only heard that. I don't even remember what. I think it was "Pour Some Sugar on Me." Was that the name of this? I think that was the track that they released at that time. I'm like, they have to have one commercial song on there. So just and no, the whole thing.
Yep.
Even my buddies that came over. Oh, we're gonna listen to the new Def Leppard album. All right, Jason's got it on vinyl. Huh? It was such a letdown.
And see, I had a bunch of friends that just loved it, and they were trying to talk me into going and seeing Def Leppard and AC/DC, and I'm like, I wouldn't pay money for either of their albums. Why the hell would I pay money to see them in concert? Because I was that rare person growing up in our age. I hated AC/DC, and I hated Def Leppard.
Every fucking party I went to in high school was two albums got played: AC/DC's Back in Black and Garth Brooks' Greatest Hits. So we go from Back in Black to Friends in Low Places.
Right.
And it like apparently across the entire spectrum of musical taste to everybody, because nobody ever bitched about the music because it was just standard. It's like, so what do you listen to now? More Garth Brooks. Okay.
Oh, great. Whereas for me, I mean, my first concert was when I was 15 years old, and these are three bands that you couldn't even hear on the radio at the time, and that was Dio, Megadeth, and Sabotage.
Right. Okay. Yeah, you would never. Yeah. No. Other than hearing "Man on the Silver Mountain," you definitely wouldn't hear any of them on the radio at that time.
Right, but that was more Montrose at the time.
Yeah, it wasn't Dio, but he sang on it.
Right. Yeah, or maybe one of his Black Sabbath songs when he was with Black Sabbath, but you didn't hear his solo stuff, and the solo stuff was by far the best stuff. And me being a 15-year-old kid, I'm up front, and I'm doing the cross devil horns at Dio, and he points down at me and does it back, and I'm like, now I know why girls threw the panties at these guys back then. I was like, this is so fucking cool. I got recognized.
This 5'2" guy did some devil horns back at me.
But I mean, they had probably the best stage show I had ever seen. Mm-hmm. I would say it would compare it to an Alice Cooper one, though I'd never seen it live, but I've seen tape versions of Alice Cooper shows. But I mean, Craig Goldie, the lead guitarist at the time, is doing this guitar solo, and this mechanical spider's coming down from the ceiling, and he's shooting lasers out the end of his guitar, and this dragon head comes out and breathes dry ice out on everybody, and it was just like, this is fucking awesome. But that man he's 5'2", but he owned that fucking stage.
Oh yeah. So that was your first concert. Mine was also when I was 15, but it was Ted Nugent, Pat Travers.
Yeah, I'm sorry, man. I win.
Whiplash Bash on my 15th birthday. Woohoo! Saginaw Civic Center.
Yeah, but my two follow-up concerts aren't much better. It was Joan Jett and the Blackhearts.
I've seen her. Good show.
Yep. But then the Club MTV tour with Milli Vanilli.
Ooh. You know what, though? That's ironically great. Because knowing what you know now about Milli Vanilli, that's actually awesome that you got to witness Rob and Fab lip-syncing in front of the world playing that arena.
Yeah.
Everybody thought, girl, I know it's true, or it's true,
mm-hmm.
And it was all a lie.
Yep.
So ironically, that's actually not a bad show.
Well, what irritated me is, okay, I had a crush on Paula Abdul. She wasn't there for that show, but Information Society were actually really good.
Right on.
And so was Not Was.
Oh.
but then was Milli Vanilli. Then Tone Loc came on. I got through 2 songs and we left.
Gotcha.
I wasn't into rap, and Tone Loc was like the epitome of dumbing down music to me. I'm going to talk about the dumbest things, and people are going to love it.
You're not into Funky Cold Medina?
No, not at all. But, again, though, but back then, I had also grown up listening to stuff that most people didn't. Like, I was a huge David Bowie fan before he was, like, doing the changes and stuff like that. But, I mean, I'm Ziggy Stardust Bowie, back when he was a little bit out there. And, I love
he actually lived for 2 years on white milk, bell peppers, and cocaine. Yep.
How many albums did he do in those 2 years? It was something like 3 or 4 albums, and he doesn't even remember.
He doesn't remember them.
Yeah, that's just amazing, and they were phenomenal albums.
But but going back to the amazing, or going back to your second concert, like my second one happened to be Slayer and Testament, which
nice
bands that you definitely wouldn't see or hear on the radio, and still to this day you don't hear them much. But it was funny at that show because here I am, I'm still 15 years old. This is January in Flint, Michigan. It's 3, maybe 4 degrees outside. We have to wait an hour in line to get into this place. So we're all huddled, and everybody's stupid. It's like nobody brings a shirt or a jacket because we're about to go into a metal show.
Right.
We're all going to be squeezed together. Well, because it was Slayer, protesters showed up. So this big van pulls up there, and these people jump out, and they're all dressed up like their faces are painted like mimes, but they're all coming out and they're doing this like happy dance thing. We're looking, I'm like, I'm not even high. I'm not drunk. What the fuck am I looking at? So they're like jumping around doing this like happy dance, and somebody goes, "Oh, don't you worry about things like the devil?" And a 5th guy jumps out, and he's got his face painted red. He goes like, "I'm the devil." And it's like just the corniest voice. "I'm the devil." And here, out of nowhere, don't even remember where the guy came from. He's like 6'8", like 300 pounds, stands over the top of the guy. Now this guy's only like 5'6", 5'7", the guy claiming to be the devil. And this other guy jumps up and goes, "I'm the devil." They all jumped in their van and took off. We didn't get the rest of the play. I was pissed.
I never dealt with like that. But what always amazed me when I went to these concerts when I was younger is watching people get fucked up at the concerts, on drugs or alcohol or whatever. But halfway through the show, they're passed out.
Yeah.
I'm like, I paid $25 for this goddamn ticket. I'm watching the show. I want to remember it.
I went to a show with a guy once, and I remember he was feeling it. He was pretty drunk. I was feeling it. So I thought, you know what? A little bit of food, sober him up a little bit. So I bought 2 hot dogs for him, 2 hot dogs for me. And then like halfway through the last band set, I looked down, and all the hot dogs that were used to be in his stomach were now in his lap.
Oh.
He's slumped over. He's got this pile of hot dogs in his lap. I'm like, just stay there.
Yeah. Yeah, I never got that. I never understood it. I mean, to each their own, but I mean, when you think back to the 80s and you think of music, the names that pop out, because, like I said, all the metal back then, for you and I, it'd be different than most people, but because we listened to that underground music. Mm-hmm. But, you got Michael Jackson, Madonna, Duran Duran, David Bowie, Journey, Cyndi Lauper, Prince, Bon Jovi, INXS, Van Halen / Hagar,
yeah.
Skid Row, Poison. Skid Row is more late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah. But, going back to that too, something else that was pop culture that kind of typified the 80s was the drug scene, because something that came out of there was the high society's love of cocaine and the urban area's love of crack.
Right.
But then they started to blend, and it's like there was no distinct markets for these anymore. It was just crack was everywhere, coke was everywhere, and it was in what, just like with the toys and the marketing for these things, it was in everything. You had the president coming on and the president's wife declaring war on our own people over this stuff. You know, Miami Vice was all about taking down drug kingpins. You know, there was the whole war on cocaine wars going on, the cocaine cowboys and stuff in South Florida, and the influx of dollars that stuff brought into these areas. They built half of Miami on drug.
Right. Well, and the touch on that, I mean, you talk about cocaine and crack. Okay, cocaine was the high society, but when these people spent so much money on cocaine that their money was drying up, then they went to crack because crack was cheaper.
Yeah.
It was, you could get crack a hell of a lot cheaper than you could get cocaine. So then they would go, you started with cocaine, then when you spent all your money, then you went to crack because then you could just suck somebody's dick for
it. Right. Like Bob Saget said, I don't think anybody's ever sucked somebody's dick for weed.
Right. Oddly enough, though, I saw a show where somebody did. Oh. I can't remember.
Okay, his third shot.
Oh, shit. What? I can't remember the show, but it was funny. Anyway, but I mean, you look at that and, like, then you look like sports. You know, our role models growing up were sports. You know,
so something that, I'm glad you said that, because something that's different from today's marketed athlete to athletes from back then was the athletes from our childhood didn't wear their jerseys, so we knew who the fuck they were in their ad. Right. There's a lot of these people, and I even watch sports. There's a lot of these guys that are in Subway ads and car commercials and stuff like that. I don't know who the hell they are unless they have their jersey on.
Right.
I don't think you deserve you don't deserve a shoe if I can't pick you out of a lineup.
Right. But also, I mean, exposure was another thing. Athletes back then didn't have the exposure that the athletes now do because we didn't have social media. We didn't have 70 million news channels or TV channels. I mean, ESPN came out in the 80s, but it didn't really get big until the 90s.
Right.
You know, but I mean, you look at, like, for me, my role models were like Barry Sanders, Joe Montana, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, name a few. I'm not going to say Michael Jordan because I couldn't stand him.
I didn't really care for him back then either, so I respected his game, but I wasn't a fan.
He was kind of a crybaby and kind of a ball hog. But, I mean, he made his team great, and I respect his abilities. He was a great ball player, but because of him, Isaiah Thomas couldn't be on the dream team, and that really didn't set right with me.
Yeah.
Granted, I'm a Michigan person, so Isaiah was part of the bad boys of the Pistons, but I mean, Joe Montana, let's go there because everybody knew Joe Montana. Yeah. And he didn't have to wear a jersey. They knew what his face looked like. They knew what his voice sounded like, and he carried himself with, like, this charisma, this charm, that if he did something wrong, we never knew about it. And now if an athlete does something wrong, it's headlines instantly.
And there's nothing about Joe Montana, for me personally, that screams I should like the man. He played for the 49ers, and he went to school at Notre Dame. I should hate him.
Right. But see, I like the 49ers. They were my team back then, them and the Redskins. And I think because I've always hated the Cowboys. And, it just goes hand in hand. You hate the Cowboys, you love the Redskins because they were the two main competitors. But to me, the ultimate athlete from the 80s and probably the most humble athlete you'll ever meet, Barry Sanders.
Oh, absolutely. Hands down.
Also, the best running back, I don't care what anybody says, the best running back to ever play the game.
Yes.
He had a shitty team in front of him. He had a shitty line in front of him. And granted, just to gain 10 yards, he had to run 50. But, because he's back and forth, nobody could catch it.
He had some of the most exciting 2-yard losses that you'll ever see in your. And when he runs for negative yards and it still makes a Sports Center highlight. That's telling you something.
Yeah. But, I mean, he got the end zone, and he handed the ref the ball and walked off the field.
Yeah.
He didn't sit there and dance and do all that, spike the ball or any of this other bullshit. He played the game with respect and love of the game. I mean, I get the spiking the ball. Like, you're excited, you do it, but to be that humble and to be this huge star like he was, to me, that says a lot about his character.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, there was. I mean, that type of athlete is like once in a generation.
Yeah,
maybe once in a lifetime.
Quite possibly.
Yeah. To be that good and to be that humble.
Yeah, and to go out on your own terms.
Yes.
Not chasing anything because you don't care about that. I mean, he cared about winning, but he didn't care about the records. He could have owned the records had he continued to play, but he didn't. That's not what he was about.
And if he had the line that Dallas had, he would have had 5 to 10 more yards, or 5 to 10 more thousand yards.
Yeah, definitely. How are we doing on time here? Does it say?
No, not yet.
Okay,
it's still going.
But I mean, that was the sports of our era. I mean, that's how. And look at baseball, and for me, it was Kirk Gibson and Milt Wilcox are my favorite baseball players. They played for the Tigers. And then except for when Gibson was with the Dodgers, and his most famous hit was a home run for the Dodgers.
Yeah, when he couldn't even walk.
Right. But those are my favorites. I mean, but we had the team. We had, Milt Wilcox. We had Kurt Gibson. We had Alan Trammell. We had,
Lou
Whitaker, Herndon. All these guys that were they were all pretty humble athletes.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, we also had, what was it? That closing pitcher, the
Morris.
Not Morris. The one before that, all that. I want to say they call him like the Bird or something like that.
Oh, Friedrich.
Yeah, he was a bit out there.
Yeah.
But he was good.
Right. But it's interesting though. It's like when athletes from back then, they went into, we had them in all sorts of things. They were in our cartoons.
Yeah.
They rode with Scooby-Doo.
Right. And the Harlem Globetrotters.
Yeah.
I remember when the Harlem Globetrotters went to Gilligan's Island.
Yeah. And then somehow they got off the island, but Gilligan couldn't go with.
Right. The 80s was just so full of pop culture, and yes, there's still a lot of, I want to say in the 90s, pop culture died off a little bit, but made a resurgence within the last 10 to 15 years.
And it's weird because a lot of it is the resurgence of things that were from the 80s.
Right.
A lot of this stuff has been rebooted. Like G.I. Joe movies have come out. There's Hello Kitty and My Little Pony.
Transformers.
All the toys have come back.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, back in the 80s, we'd have stickers of all our favorite cartoon characters plastered all over everything. Our notebooks and shit like that. But
we even had like 2 degrees of every type of cartoon. Because we had Garfield, which is the highbrow, and then we had Heathcliff, which was the cheaper books you bought at the dollar store. Then you had the Smurfs, and then you had the Snorks, which were the creatures under the sea. So it's like we had like 2 versions of everything.
Right. It was like it's like name brand and generic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and we had the ultimate thing that came out of the 80s in the Muppets. Oh. I don't know how we can talk about the 80s without talking about the Muppets.
Some of the best movie cameos of all time have happened in their movies.
Yeah. Well, in their TV shows. My all-time favorite TV show was The Muppets with Alice Cooper.
Oh, good episode. I was going to say the one with Steve Martin where he showed up and they weren't going to have a show.
Right.
Perform for the guys.
But that was great. I mean, and that back then Saturday Night Live was actually funny.
Yeah.
Because we went through we caught the end of the Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi, and all that into the Eddie Murphy, Joe Piscopo era.
Yes.
Which then evolved into like the Dana Carvey, Mike Myers, and then it just.
Yeah, there's been a few character actors that have been on the show that have been funny, but overall they haven't been that great.
Right. I mean, you got somebody like Will Ferrell. He's good on the show. He's good in a supporting role, but please stop giving him his own movies. Because when he's the main star, he sucks. That's just my opinion, but
Right on.
I'm sure a lot of people have different opinions to it, but I just can't get into him. Love him as a supporting character. I think he's a great supporting character, one of the all-time best.
You just put John C. Reilly next to him, and I think he's gold.
Yep. I'm good with that. Like Step Brothers.
Yes.
Yep.
Just like Cold Case Files.
Yeah. Or even he did good with Marky Mark. What?
Oh, and like the Dad movie.
Daddy's Home.
Daddy's Home. That's it.
Yeah, but I mean, he did good with him. But then again, he's not the main guy. They're together. It's a buddy comedy.
He's playing the straight man.
Right. But let's stop making him giving him his own movie because it just doesn't work.
Right.
I mean, I would be the same with John Belushi, honestly, and it's sad to say because he was just brilliant. But I think if he would like the one movie he did with Margot Kidder when he was a writer,
Continental Divide.
Yeah, it wasn't quite John Belushi.
Yeah, it wasn't what anybody was expecting.
No.
Yeah.
He didn't do bad in it, but it just wasn't it.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Now put him in Animal House or was it 1941 or 1942?
Yes.
Those were great. He was fantastic, but not on his own. But you have certain actors like that, and that's another big rabbit hole we just went down.
Exactly, and that's the point of this podcast. And
yes.
I mean, I think that was great. I think we hit pretty much all the pop culture from our life.
Yeah. You know what we did forget though? We'll have to do at the end of the show. And maybe edit it into the beginning. Our disclaimer: if you're easily offended, don't listen to us.
Yeah. Exactly. Please, yes. So if you listened to all that and you got to this point, then you shouldn't have listened to the rest of that. You should have listened to this part first.
Right.
And we're sorry about that, but just remember for the next time that this part would be at the beginning.
Right. Well, I mean, there's a couple other things, I'm going to go back to like the catchphrase and stuff. I'm an excellent driver. Whopper's on at 7 o'clock.
Oh,
definitely.
Rain Man was that's an iconic. Well, going back to the Tom Cruise thing, it's like it was. I like the movies that he's in.
Yeah, I just didn't care for Top Gun and the Eyes Wide Shut. I couldn't get through 5 minutes of it. I can't see Kidman either.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of her, but and it's weird because I don't think that movie turned out the way that Stanley Kubrick wanted it to.
No, probably not.
Died before it was finished, and when it was released, I don't think that's the movie that he was envisioning.
Right. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the 90s, so I'm going to jump into that again real quick. Because out of the 90s, my favorite movie from the 90s, The Crow.
Okay.
I think that was the 90s. It might have been the early 2000s. But all those years run together for me. But to me, I didn't even know it was a comic book movie when I watched it.
Mm.
But at the time it came out, it was probably the most successful comic book movie.
Oh, yeah. It probably was the most successful one until Blade came out.
Yeah, but it was a stand on its own. It didn't need to, anything to say, okay, this was a comic book movie. The story was just phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Brandon Lee did an incredible job until he died,
Yeah.
and then they had to put somebody else in there and superimpose his face over top of him.
Yeah. Which
But
was that whole story about him dying is tragic because he dies the way that his father died.
yeah, well, it was, Bruce Lee said there was a curse on his family,
Mhm.
and that kind of makes you wonder.
Exactly.
But all right, well, so do we want to wrap? Let's see. I'm looking through my notes real quick. This is me turning pages. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Let's see. Oh, you know what we didn't talk about?
What's that?
The most iconic toy of the 80s.
Oh.
The Rubik's Cube.
Oh yeah. It's funny too because the Rubik's Cube is one of these things where I still haven't solved it without tearing it apart. But I've
Or
never
peeling
really spent the amount of
stuff.
time that's required. Or now you can watch a YouTube video and learn how to do it in less than 5 minutes.
Right.
But I always get stuck in watching the ones where this kid solves 3 different size Rubik's cubes while holding his breath underwater at the same time.
Well, and another thing the 80s were good for was, I mean, you look back to like the 50s and 60s, and they tried sci-fi.
Mhm.
What wasn't it? Danger Will Robinson, didn't that come out in like the late 60s, early 70s?
Yeah, the
Lost
Lost in
in Space.
Space.
Yeah. The 80s kind of took sci-fi to a new level. I mean, because with Star Wars and Star Trek, but there was more to it too. I mean, I had it and I lost it. Where'd it go? Looking through my notes real quick, trying to
Well,
find it.
there was a bunch of different. They with the sci-fi, they actually turned it into story because you had
Yeah.
things like Battlestar Galactica, you had V,
Oh, yeah. Buck Rogers.
yeah, which were more story driven as opposed to special effects driven, and then they kind of got away with that in like the late '90s and early 2000s when the advent of CGI because they went away from story because they
Right.
went back to just doing let's wow us with the special effects.
Right. Right. But I mean, I remember my mom all the time, when she'd get a little buzzed up, going, bitty, 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 bug. I can't remember that little robot's name from Buck Rogers, but that's
No.
also where Pam Dawber from Mork and Mindy went.
Mm.
Or Aaron Gray. Is that it? Aaron Gray. No, it was Aaron Gray because she was in that, and then she was in Silver Spoons. Pam Dawber
Okay, yeah,
was,
that'd be Aaron Gray.
yep. But they looked really similar. But,
Yes, they do.
all right, let's wrap this one up, take a quick break, and then we'll come back and do today's pop culture,
Okay.
which will probably be much quicker.
Right on.
Because I only have 1 page of notes of those instead of the 5 I had of these.
Right on.
All right. But I'm going to go have a smoke real quick, so I'm going to leave the call.
Okay.
And
I'm
then,
gonna stop recording and then I'll send you a link here in just a minute.
okay, I'll be back probably like 10 minutes.
Perfect.
Okay.
Sounds good. All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.